passage today. And then in our Romans passage, Paul is encouraging the Romans to be patient, the last verse of that passage. In our gospel passage today, Jesus is instructing the disciples using a metaphor that would have been common to them in terms of the wheat and the weeds. And separating the wheat and the weeds happens at the harvest time, so not to prematurely judge which one is which and throw away the good wheat. So God leaves that up to the angels. It's not our job. Perhaps one of the things that is our job, though, is to pay attention to the word patient. To be patient, to add patience and space into our lives can be a helpful thing, to allow the mystery of God to work and to exist, so that we don't prematurely exert our own agendas, and to that we need to hold space together. It's one thing to do that as an individual, but Jesus is not just instructing one disciple, he's instructing a group of disciples. And as we hear the word today, we are encouraged as a group, as a community, to hold that sacred space for one another. Last night I was in a local barbershop getting my hair cut because I'm going to California for a week of school. I didn't want to be accused of being a hippie in California. It was getting over my ears, you know. But I said, well, maybe I don't have time. Maybe I'll just do it when I'm there. And I'm driving, and I'm passing one shop, and I go to a barbershop down here, and they're closed. And then so I turn on Manchester, and I'm going out towards Wildwood, where I live. And I look at a couple of places, and they're closed. And so I find the one that's farthest away, of course, that's open. And it's a place I've been to before. And I tend to use coupons when I go places, you know, save a couple bucks. I went into this place, and the manager was there, and she recognized me, and I've seen her before, and I recognized her, of course. We don't know much about each other, and I had just come from a hospital visit earlier in the afternoon, and I was wearing my black clericals. And she said, as we get started, she said, "Are you the Grim Reaper?" I said, "No, I'm a priest." She said, "Oh, then you're the opposite." It was very humbling. So I could only imagine where my haircut was going to go after that. I said, you know, she asked me where I was. I said, I'm in St. Martin's and where it is. And she goes, "Oh, yeah, I know where that is." And she said, "I became a Christian just a few years ago." And she said, "I go to such and such church. It's in this area." And she said, I was a new Christian when they asked me what kind of things I like to do. And she said, "Well, I like young people." And they said, "Great, we have just a place for you." And they asked her to teach Sunday school to junior high girls, junior high is my favorite age. It's a great age. And she said she loved the kids, but she was having a difficult time with the curriculum, and they were moving her from grade to grade all year long. Long story short, she never really felt like she found her place there. And she wondered why God had put her in that place. And of course, she had prayed about it and taken the challenge and had done it in a good spirit. But she said, I was really frustrated. I didn't know what to do with that. It was a great ministry, but I just felt like it wasn't my place at that point in my life. And she said, I always had this love of horses since I was a little girl. And I drove by a riding stable, and I decided to go in. So I thought that would be kind of therapeutic and helpful for me if I started riding again. And I have this connection to horses, and she went on and told me about her story. And she said she stopped at the riding stables. And don't you know that at the moment she was there was a group of handicapped children coming back from a riding lesson. And she said, I knew why God had put me in that classroom for that year and why God took me to that riding stable that afternoon at that moment, because it brought those things together. And now she's serving that camp in that capacity, bringing together her love of horses and her love of people and her love of God all together to serve. I asked her if I could share that story with you all because as she was talking, she was describing a year of waiting, of being patient, of looking through the weeds. And sometimes our lives can feel like that, can't they? Like there's more weeds than wheat. But God walks us through the fields of weeds as well, because there is fruit to be gathered in God's good timing and in God's ways. I remember being a boy, we had a sliding glass door on the back of our house that, if we washed it, it was clear. But the downside of that was sometimes birds thought that it was a passageway. And you could, if we were outside playing, you could sometimes hear the birds hit the window. And usually, most of the time, they were fine. They just needed some time. But the neighbor had a cat who also heard the sound of the birds and would keep a very watchful eye for those birds laying on the patio. And so my friends and I, if we were quick enough and we were in the area, we'd walk over and try to get there before the cat got there. And we'd take the little bird, and we'd just take turns holding the bird. And I don't think any of us wore a watch. I don't have a clue how long it was. But we would hold that bird for a long time sometimes. We might go over to a tree and sit in the shade or something, but you'd have to hold that bird for a while. If you bent it or tried to correct it or stretch its wings out or lift it up to throw it to cause it to fly prematurely, oftentimes it wouldn't help. So we learned to hold on to the bird just gently, give it room, but enough to where we could cradle it. And then we'd pass it to one another until it was ready. And when it was ready, it would kind of shake and flutter off. Sometimes people hit glass walls and they are stunned and they need some time. They need some time, some sanctuary, and some nurturing in order to sort of rouse themselves when they're ready and take off. And as a community, part of our patience is about holding that tension, that space that allows for God's mystery to work. There's a famous poem that Thomas Merton writes about in one of his books. It's about a Chinese woodcarver, and I want to share it with you. The name of the master woodcarver is named King, and there is a Prince Lu in this. What would a story be without a good prince? And it's called The Woodcarver. King, the master carver, made a bell stand of precious wood. When it was finished, all who saw it were astounded. They said it must be the work of spirits. The Prince of Lu said to the master carver, "What is your secret?" And King replied, "I am only a workman. I have no secret. There is only this. When I began to think about the work you commanded, I guarded my spirit, did not expend it on trifles that were not to the point. I fasted in order to set my heart at rest. After 3 days fasting, I had forgotten gain and success. After 5 days, I had forgotten praise or criticism. After 7 days, I had forgotten my body with all its limbs. And by this time, all thought of your highness and of the court had faded away. All that might distract me from the work had vanished. I was collected in the single thought of the bell stand. Then I went to the forest to see the trees in their own natural state. When the right tree appeared before my eyes, the bell stand also appeared in it, clearly, beyond doubt. All I had to do was to put forth my hand and begin. If I had not met this particular tree, there would have been no bell stand at all. What happened? My own collected thought encountered the hidden potential in the wood. From this live encounter came the work which you ascribe to the spirits. The potential that we have, the ability to see within community, is immense. And it's a gift that we receive too as individuals, to be seen, to be heard, to be given sanctuary and time. The moments in our lives that are full of weeds, for somebody to say, there is wheat in that field. For us to allow God to work through our vision so that it's not only our heads that see, but our hearts that see what God has already planted. Jesus thought so much about wheat that he asked us to remember him by it, with the bread and the wine that we receive at communion today. Let us remember the seeds that God has planted. Thanks be to God. Amen.